The Georgia Bulldogs are making the trip north to Lexington on Saturday for their SEC opener against the Kentucky Wildcats. And in today's video, I've got you covered. I tell you everything you need to know about this matchup between the Dogs and Cats with a crash course preview of this weekend's Georgia-Kentucky game.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is the Glory UGA podcast, brought to you by our great friends at MyBookie. If you're a diehard Georgia fan, you're going to want to go ahead and subscribe to this channel right now for a lot more content designed for you guys, the most diehard Georgia fans on planet Earth. Watch the videos, like the videos, comment. It's all greatly appreciated. But most importantly, check out the Glory UGA podcast, wherever you get your podcast, for a whole lot more coverage of Georgia football throughout this 2024 Georgia football season. But all right, guys, look, I know that life gets busy and you only have so much time to consume content. Even you diehard Georgia fans who love Georgia football, you've only got so much time during the week to get prepared for the next game. So this week, I decided I would try to help you out with a condensed yet still detailed crash course preview of Georgia's SEC opener against the Kentucky Wildcats this weekend. So let's go ahead, guys, and dive right into it. We all know that Georgia has dominated this series with Kentucky. You don't really need me to tell you that. 63-12. All time, Georgia leads the series 63-12, has won 14 in a row, clearly dominates this series with Kentucky. However, the games in Lexington during Kirby Smart's time in Athens have actually been a little bit closer. Georgia has won all the games under Kirby Smart in Lexington, but those wins have only come by an average of 10 points since 2016. In Athens, they've been blowouts. Georgia under Kirby Smart has beaten Kentucky by an average of 27 points per game since 2016. So will that trend continue this week? Will this game between Georgia and Kentucky be closer than it otherwise would be because it's in Lexington? That's what we're going to try to find out today. Now, if you watched Kentucky get smacked around by South Carolina last weekend, you would be inclined to say no. This trend will not continue this year. There's no way this Kentucky team can play Georgia close, can stay in this game. The Dogs going to roll, going to blow them out, especially given all the offensive issues that Kentucky had last week against the Gamecocks. Hey, guys, I don't know if you watched the game. If you didn't, just take my word for it. The Kentucky offense was absolutely inept a week ago against South Carolina, and currently through two games is dead last in the SEC in scoring offense, total offense, and passing offense, and is 15th of 16 teams in the SEC in yards per play. So whatever you want to look at, the total numbers, you want to look at from an efficiency standpoint, a yards per play standpoint, this Kentucky offense is bad right now. And there really are two main issues that the Kentucky offense is dealing with right now. Quarterback play on one hand and offensive line play on the other hand. We all know Brock Vandagriff was here in Athens for a couple of years. He's a local kid, Prince Avenue, but he transferred from Georgia when Carson Beck decided to come back. He transfers from Georgia to Kentucky with high hopes of finally being the guy that changes things for the Kentucky offense, of finally being the quarterback that Kentucky fans have dreamed of for all these years, the missing piece to that puzzle. But it hadn't worked out quite that way to this point. It's early, but so far the returns have not been great. He was fine-ish against Southern Miss, made some nice throws, did some good things with his legs, but also made some ridiculously questionable throws, and one throw that should have absolutely been a walk-in pick six, just didn't see the defender. The guy just dropped it right in his chest. That should have been a pick six. So he was up and down against Southern Miss, but last week against South Carolina, look, I don't take any pleasure in criticizing Brock Vandagriff. Seems like a great guy. I wish the best for him, except for this weekend. But to be honest with you, he was a straight-up liability last weekend against South Carolina. These numbers tell you a story. Honestly, if I just show the numbers out, it tells you everything you need to know. 3 of 10 for 30 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And the numbers, well, that's terrible. Like, I don't even know if you could be that much worse. But if you watched it, actually kind of was worse. He's just staring down receivers, not seeing the field. He's locked in on certain guys. He's predetermining where he's going with the football pre-snap, just generally not processing at a high level. And look, he's not a young quarterback, but an experienced quarterback in terms of actually playing all on the field. So you kind of get that to a degree, but he's been at the college level for a long time. And he's also missing open receivers down the field. Hit a few against Southern Miss, but also missed a lot of them and missed them badly. But as bad as he was, and he wasn't good against South Carolina, the offensive line, I would argue, was actually worse. The offensive line is going to have PTSD for a while over what Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart, South Carolina's two top pass rushers, did to them a week ago. It was flat out nasty. It was scary to see what they were doing to that Kentucky offensive line. So the Kentucky O-line last week allowed 5 sacks. It would have been more than that, but they realized, oh my God, we cannot protect Gunnar Stock, or we cannot protect Vandegrift. We can't even try to throw the football right now. We have no chance to block them when they pin their ears back and rush the passer. So we're going to run the ball. They run the ball 19 straight times in the first half. But they end up with 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks on the day. Again, simply could not block South Carolina. But it begs the question, if you are this Kentucky offense this week, staring at the number one team in the country coming into your house, you got to think, in their minds, they're questioning, how in the world are we going to block Georgia? We couldn't block South Carolina a week ago. Dylan Stewart is a stud. He's a 5-star guy, but he's a true freshman. They had no answers. Kyle Kennard was a good pass rusher at Georgia Tech, transferred to Carolina this year, but like 6 sacks was his best year. The guy's got 3.5 right now, and a lot of those came against Kentucky last week. So how in the world are you going to block Georgia's defense? How in the world are you going to score enough points to even come close to winning this game, to even push Georgia when you're talking about a top 5 Georgia defense? Well, the only hope they have is to run the football. And that's exactly what they tried to do against South Carolina once they realized pretty early on that we can't block them. They tried to run the football last week, again, 19 times in a row. They're going to do it again this week. Brock Vandegrift is struggling as a passer right now, guys. He is. He's just, he's thinking too much. He's not seeing the field. He's locking in on guys. It's not a good look for him right now. But one thing he does well is he runs the football. Dude's an athlete. He's a good, strong, powerful runner. Really, really deceptive speed. Got good speed. He can make things happen with his legs in the run game. He did that quite a bit in that first game against Southern Miss. They also might be down their top running back this week. No Chip Trayanum. Doesn't look like he's going to play in this game. But a mobile quarterback like Brock Vandegrift can help mitigate that. It can open up run lanes for the running back. I do also think they're going to try to get their dynamic wide receiver, Barian Brown, involved in the run game. If you watch the Southern Miss game, which I've gone and broken down a couple times, they got him heavily involved in the fly sweep game, the pop pass game, trying to get the guy the ball on the perimeter, on the edges. They realize, the quarterback is hit or miss right now, but we still want to find ways to get the ball in Barian Brown's hands because the guy can play, can flat out run. He's a speed merchant out there. So they're going to try to test on the edges, which why would you not do that? If you go back and look at Georgia's defense last year, where did we have issues defending the run last year? Primarily, it was on the edges. So they are going to attack the edges. They've got the speed to do that. I think they're going to try to force us to play in space. They're going to do that with a perimeter run game. They're going to do that with the screen game as well. Again, if you have a quarterback, you don't really trust to throw the ball down the field, but you don't want the defense to be able to just pin their ears back and come after you. You got to keep them honest. Some way, somehow, the screen game is a way to do that. They also, again, have some dynamic playmakers on this offense, whether it's Barian Brown, whether it's Jamori Macklin, a 1,000-yard receiver last year at North Texas who's come over to Kentucky this year. That's how I expect them to come out trying to attack Georgia. And to be honest with you, traditionally under Mark Stoops, that's how Kentucky offenses have attacked Georgia. I'm just not sure they think that they can block us long enough to be able to set up the play action shots down the field that they try to take. Really, they try to build this team in the image of Georgia. They just don't have the players that Georgia has to work with. So from a defensive standpoint for Georgia this week, if that's how they're going to try to attack, and it wouldn't shock me they came out with like a spread option offense, kind of like what we saw from Auburn a year ago, and just try to use some misdirection, get our eyes in the wrong spot, use a lot of quarterback run game to attack us in space, attack the perimeter, it wouldn't shock me at all. So what we need to do very much so in this game, is tackle well. You get in space, you got to get guys on the ground, and you need to play with great eye discipline. Play with great eye discipline. That's what got us in trouble against that kind of spread option attack with Auburn last year. Our eyes in the wrong spots. We're keying the wrong guys. And we were falling for all the window dressing. We cannot fall into that trap this week. From a schematic standpoint, I would play a lot of cover 3, cover 6, the match coverage stuff that we like to do, and just play with single high safety. I think you've got to force Brock Vandagriff in this Kentucky offense to prove to us that they can hurt us down the field in the vertical passing game enough to actually make us pay. Can they even block us to allow that to even happen? So come out, get the guys in the box, expect them to try to run the football, and don't allow them to do that. They're going to try to get the numbers edge with Vandagriff using his legs. Don't allow them to do that. That's how I would attack this Kentucky offense. Defensively, the story's much better for Kentucky. They are much better on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, they gave up 31 points to South Carolina a week ago. Sure, that happened. But that doesn't really tell the whole story. You actually had to watch the game to figure out how Carolina got to 31 points. South Carolina only had 252 total yards of offense last week, guys. It wasn't like they were just running the ball all over this Kentucky defense. That's not what's happening. They had a couple plays early in the game, and the Kentucky started pressing, man. Like Mark Stoops went on tilt early in that game, was going for it on 4th down in his own territory. And they didn't need to. And it's like, what are you doing, man? And they didn't get it. Set up short fields for South Carolina. They were able to capitalize on those short fields. They threw a pick 6, a horrible pick 6, essentially threw into quadruple coverage. And if you go back and watch replay, Vandagriff is staring down the slot receiver from the snap. And all they're doing is sitting there in his zone, reading his eyes like, yep, there we go, pick 6. That's how they got to 31 points. It wasn't because the Kentucky defense did not play well. In fact, right now, this Kentucky defense is 4th in the SEC in total defense, and they're especially good against the run. They're 3rd in the SEC right now in rushing defense, only allowing 45 rushing yards per game. And they're good against the run because they have an extremely strong front 6. Not quite the level of what we saw against Clemson as a whole, but a strong front 6. Led, of course, by All-American candidate Deion Walker, who is just a freak of nature, man. He's like a Jordan Davis-esque kind of guy, 6'6", 345, massive human being, but insane athleticism. He's so athletic, they can play him all over the front. They play him at like defensive end, like rush end at times. They'll play him at the 3-tech. They'll play him at 0-tech at times to create matchups. That makes it hard to game plan against him because you don't know where the guy is going to line up on a down-by-down basis. They really use him to try to create matchups. The guy is a stud. That size, athleticism combination makes him very versatile, makes him very valuable. He will give us some problems at times. Just understand that, guys. Don't freak out if Deion Walker makes a play in the backfield here and there. He's that good. He is elite. He's an All-American type guy. I think he's a first-round draft pick. The only issue for Deion Walker is the reality that Kentucky has no one behind him that can come even remotely close to giving them what Deion Walker gives them, to replacing his production, which means the guy just basically can't leave the field. He's a 6'6", 345-pound dude. Guys that big, generally speaking, aren't in as good condition as like a running back, right? They're carrying a lot of weight. It's harder for them to move around like that for that long. Well, this guy has played 88% of their snaps through the first 2 weeks. And that's not surprising. Last year, he played 83% of their snaps. So what does that mean? It means that he takes plays off. And I'm not ripping the guy. He's got to. He's a 345-pounder playing 88% of their defensive snaps. That's crazy. But they got to play him because he comes off the field and there's a major drop-off. But he will take plays off. He will take plays off. And if you get him worn out late in the second half, he's not nearly as effective. And if you look at it, to give you guys a reference here, there's no one on the Georgia defensive line this year through 2 weeks that has played more than 57% of our defensive snaps. That's Tyrone Ingram-Dawkins played 57% of our defensive snaps on the defensive line. He's the only one on our defensive line that has played more than 50% of our defensive snaps through 2 weeks. And we're talking about 88% of their snaps for Deion Walker. Again, he doesn't come off the field. But when he's not gassed and he's fresh, he's a handful, man. A guy's trouble. And they're also pretty good around him in the front six. Maybe not elite around him, but good around him. You got J.J. Weaver, who had 7 sacks a year ago, is a really good edge rusher. Trayvon Rabaka is also a good rusher off the end as well as a defensive end. And at inside linebacker, they got 2 good players. De'Aaron Jackson led them in tackles last year. He's back again this year. We know Pop Dumas-Johnson, who started for Georgia for a couple years, has now transferred to Kentucky. And look, those guys are good. They're good SEC linebackers. But here's the thing with both those guys, especially Pop Dumas-Johnson. They're good athletes. You don't play in the SEC if you're not a good athlete. But relative to other guys in the SEC, they're like elite inside linebackers in this league, they aren't that type of athlete. So I'm not saying they can't run sideline to sideline. They just aren't as athletic doing so. They don't move as quickly as guys like Smile Munden and Raylan Wilson and Jalen Walker and CJ Allen for us. They just don't, all right? So if I'm Georgia, I would attack them in space. We'll get to that in a little bit here in a second. Secondary-wise, they're very experienced back there. You got 2 guys. Maxwell Harrison's a really good long safety, athletic guy, good ball skills. Zion Childers is experienced safety for them. So they're good, maybe not elite in the secondary, but very, very experienced back there. But this is a good Kentucky defense with a front six that I think is probably the strength of the entire Kentucky team. So I think the key to having success against this Kentucky defense comes down to 2 things, really. Attack them in space, as I just mentioned. Jackson and Pop are good athletes. They're good athletes, good, but they're not elite athletes. I think that we can have success tackling or attacking them in space and forcing those guys to move sideline to sideline. That's the first part. The second part of that is, look, they're not deep on defense. So you want to get into that depth. They have to play they have a certain number of guys that are good players to them up front, but they got to play a lot of snaps. You got to make them run. You got to make them chase. You got to make them pursue. You've got to get into that depth. How do you do that? Well, you attack the perimeter and with fly sweeps like we saw against Clemson, with pop passes, with a screen game, which I know frustrates you sometimes, like you saw against Clemson. I know that was frustrating that we only scored 6 points in that half. There were opportunities to score more, and you wanted to see us take more shots down the field, but I understand why we did that. Clemson has an elite front six. They just don't have much depth like Kentucky. So we want to wear them down and get after them in the second half, which is exactly how that played out. So I honestly would not be opposed to a very similar game plan here against Kentucky. Attack them in space, get the ball to our playmakers out there, let them go to work, make their elite defensive front, or at least Deion Walker, elite player, make those guys chase, run, wear them out. And in the second half, just pour it on them. Those plays will open up. Deion Walker and the other guys are going to be worn out in the second half because they just have to play too many snaps. And of course, once you get in the second half, then you go to play action. The pass rush will not be as fearsome. It won't be as ferocious because those guys don't have the same gear that they had early in the game. And then if you look at it from a special team standpoint, the one guy you got to watch out for, again, is Barian Brown. He is their elite playmaker on offense and also in the special teams game. He has 4 career returns for touchdowns. He is a dynamic weapon, especially when you talk about the kick return game. He changes games. They beat Louisville last year and hit their over on the win total, which helped your boy out last year. And one of the big reasons why is Barian Brown had a huge return for a touchdown in that game, kind of turned the momentum. You've got to be aware of that. So how do you solve that? Just kick the freaking ball out of the end zone and don't even give him an opportunity to try to return. Don't get cute with him. Do not get cute with him. Kick the ball in the end zone. Do not give that man a chance to return the football because a return touchdown, which he's very capable of, again, 4 in his career, that could spark them. And that's, even if the offense can't move the football, that's something that can keep them in the game. We cannot allow that to happen. So there you go, guys. That is your crash course preview of this Georgia-Kentucky game this weekend. This was just a small tasting, guys, of what we have for you guys on the Glory UGA podcast. If you want more of a breakdown, a deep dive game breakdown, then make sure to check out the Glory UGA podcast. I have a full hour-plus long preview of this game. So check that out if you want more. I appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more content just like this. Like, comment, and again, check out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast. But I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.